Good morning, brethren. Welcome again to another morning devotional. This morning in our Let Us series, we're going to turn to Hebrews chapter 10. And in verses 22 to 24, we have a number of passages where the writer says, let us. We've dealt with some of these concepts in earlier passages from Hebrews, but it's the last one in verse 24 that I want us to think about. But bear with me as we read from verse number 22. The writer says, let us draw near, we've already done that one, with a true heart, in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. We've already looked at that. And he goes on and says, for he who promised is faithful. And then we come to verse 24, which I want us to particularly think about this morning. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The writer here is encouraging the people of God to encourage each other. He says, let us consider how we can stir each other up to love and good works. In other words, we are to think to ourselves, how can I encourage my fellow believers, that particular Christian, this particular Christian, how can I encourage them to grow in their love for God and in their love for one another? And how can I encourage them to good works? One of the things as a pastor that you see over the years is that there are people in congregations who discourage more than they encourage. Rather than building up, for whatever reason, they tear down. And they do that often through the things that they say, sometimes through the way they behave, and very often by their neglect of worship and Bible study. The apostle here says one of the ways in which you can build up, one of the ways in which you can promote love and encouragement and good works among your fellow believers is by making sure that you don't fall into a trap that many professing Christians have fallen into, and that is neglecting meeting together. People who are erratic in their attendance at worship, whether it's at the morning worship service or the evening worship service, or people who rarely, if ever, come to a midweek Bible study, perhaps don't realise the impact that their non-attendance has upon others. Rather than building up, rather than encouraging, it tears down and discourages. That's why the apostle here says in verse 24 and following, let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And it's clear that he's setting these in contrast. Your absence discourages, your presence encourages. How can we build others up? How can we stir them up to love and to good works? We can do it through our words. It's wonderful to have an encouraging word from a fellow believer. We can do it through our works. We can set an example, loving them, demonstrating good works that they themselves can follow. As Christians, we have a responsibility not only for our own Christian lives, but also for the lives of our fellow Christians. we have a responsibility to try and encourage them, to try and move them on from where they are in their love for God, their love for the Saviour, their love for their fellow believers, to where they are a little bit more intense, if you like, or a little bit more enthusiastic about their love for God and about their love for their fellow believers. We're to try and encourage them to even greater good works than they are currently engaging in. So here's a challenging let us that the apostle gives us today. Let us consider, let us think about it, how to stir each other up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Brethren, one of the ways that you can encourage your minister, one of the ways in which you can encourage and build up and stir up your fellow believer, is by being disciplined in making sure that you are at worship morning and evening, and coming along to midweek Bible study. That will go some way to stirring up others to love and good works. May God help us to give consideration to this in this let us that we're thinking about this morning. Every blessing.